Good evening, everyone. Welcome to lecture 6 on animal kingdom. In today's lecture, till now we learned about the basic characteristics of animal kingdom. Like the organisms which belong to animal kingdom are multicellular, they are heterotrophic, that is, they cannot make their own food. And also, we learned about the various characteristics on the basis of which animal kingdom is divided into different phyla. So, till now, we learned about different phyla. For example, we learned about the characteristics of poriferans, that are sponges. We learned about coelentrates, ctenophores. We learned about phylum Platyhelminthes, SK helminthes, and annelids. So, in today's lecture, we will learn about another phylum, which is phylum Arthropod. So, starting with the basics of animal kingdom, the organisms which belong to kingdom Animalia are multicellular in nature. So they are multicellular, that is, they are made up of many cells. And then they have, on the basis of level of organization, we divided these organisms either ones which are cellular level or which have either tissue, organ, or organ system level of organization. So we have already learned about the organisms which are cellular level organisms, that is, we learnt about the poriferans already in the first lecture. So now we are focusing on organisms which belong to kingdom Animalia and that they have organ system level of organization. On the basis of symmetry, they were further subdivided. Either they have the radial symmetry or bilateral symmetry. So bilateral symmetry are the ones in which there is only one axis of the symmetry. So the organisms can be divided into two equal halves only through the one axis, single axis. So there is only one axis of symmetry on the basis of which the organisms can be divided into two symmetrical halves. Then on the basis of the body cavity, so they can be divided into acoelomates, that is, they do not have any body cavity, pseudocoelomates, in which the body cavity is a false body cavity. So they have a false body cavity, which is SK helminthes, and we have already learned about it. Then we were focusing on the organisms that were having the true coelom, that is the coelomates. So in this, the coelom, that is a body cavity, is formed by the mesoderm. So the organisms which are true coelomates were annelids, arthropods, mollusks, echinoderms, hemichordata, and chordata. In last lecture, we have already learned about the phylum Annelids, and in today's lecture, we will focus on the organisms that belong to the phylum Arthropod and kingdom Animalia. So, basically, what we can say about phylum Arthropod is that they belong to kingdom Animalia. They have organ system level of organization. They have bilateral symmetry. They have true coelom, that is, they are coelomates, and we will focus on arthropods today. So, how the name is originated, that is, on what basis we are calling them as arthropods. So the word arthropod, so it is a Greek word which is originated from a Greek word arthropoda. So phylum is the arthropoda. It is a Greek word in which the arthron means joint. So you might have seen arthritis, which is related to joint. So this arthron word is actually related to the joint, and podos word is related to the foot. So that is, they have joint foot, or we can say they have joint appendages. So we are not only talking about foot, but we are talking about appendages as whole. We will see what different kinds of appendages are present in phylum arthropods. So basically, the origin of this word is from a Greek word, which is the arthron means joint and podos means foot. So this is a very important characteristic of arthropods, that is, they have jointed appendages. Now, if I talk about the size of the arthropods, so they vary significantly in size. That is, they can be very small, that is less than 0.1 mm in length, while there are some which can measure up to 4 meter in length. So the size varies significantly from different organisms. Some might be very small, like as I have mentioned one example, that is the parasitic mite, which measure, and one of the very those who study about these estimate that there are about a billion, that is 10 to the power 9 into 10 to the power 9, that approximately 10 to the power 18. So there is about a billion arthropods living on Earth. So we can imagine that the diversity of arthropods is huge, and this is one of the reasons why you will arthropods everywhere in every habitat, and you will see many characteristics of arthropods that have allowed these arthropods to thrive in different environment. So more than 1 million arthropods have already been described, and yet many are yet to be discovered and described. And most of the arthropods which have been described belong to the group insects. So we will see how arthropods are divided in different groups or different classes. But the important point here is that the most of these species which are being described belong to the class Insecta. So in fact, we can see that so considering this huge diversity of arthropods, we can say that 2 out of every 3 known species are arthropods. So this is a very big number, that if 3 known species are there, out of these 3, we can say that 2 will be arthropods. So this is a huge number, and members of the phylum arthropod can be found in nearly all the habitats in the biosphere. That is, you can find them in damp soil, in ocean, in water, in you can see them flying also. So we see many insects that fly. So you can find these organisms into the different habitats, nearly all the habitats in the biosphere. So by the criteria of species diversity, that is the huge diversity of the organisms that belong to phylum arthropod, their distribution, their numbers, we can say that arthropods must be regarded as the most successful of all animal phyla. So they have the capacity to bear different environmental changes, and they are considered or they are regarded as one of the most successful of all animal phyla. So it is one of the very we can say that is one of the very successful the organisms that belong to this phyla are very successful in different environmental conditions, in adapting to different environmental conditions. This is the basics which we have already discussed. Sorry. So the body is bilaterally symmetrical. They are triploblastic. So we know that what do we mean by triploblastic? They have ectoderm, head and thorax region is fused, and this lead to the formation of cephalus. So the cephalobody is for cephalothorax. So cephalobody is used for the brain. So when head and the thorax is fused, it is called as cephalothorax. So basically, we discussed about the basic characteristics, and we see the reasons why these organisms are considered to be the most successful. So basically, they have a huge species diversity. Their distribution is very large. That is, they are found in almost all the habitats. They are huge in number. That is, the estimation is about 10 to the power 18 species that belong to phylum arthropods. Therefore, they can be regarded as one of the most successful phyla of all the animal phyla. Now, these are the basic characteristics that we have already discussed, that the body is bilaterally symmetrical. So the body can be divided into 2 equal halves by the one axis. They are triploblastic. What do we mean by triploblastic? We have already discussed this in many classes. That is, they have both ectoderm, that is, they have all the 3 layers, ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Divides the health cavity. So therefore, they are telomates also. That is, they have the true body cavity. They have an organ system level of organization. They are metamerically segmented. They are coelomate animals. That is, they have a true body cavity, and their body is divided into 3 regions. So if I consider this as an arthropod, and we can divide their body into 3 regions. So the first will be the head, the second will be thorax, and then the last region will be abdomen. Also, in some cases, what we will see is that the head is fused with the thorax. So the cephalic word is used for head. Therefore, the fusion of head and thorax, so head plus thorax, in some animals lead to the is fused and is known as cephalothorax. So it is the cephalothorax. For example, in the scorpio or in crabs, in the scorpion and crabs, we will see that they do not have three distinct regions. Instead, their head and thorax is fused to form the cephalothorax. So this was about the basic arthropods. Now we will see that what are the different characteristics of arthropods, as I mentioned, in different classes. So the first one is the ones that have the claw mouth, and they have feeding fins, and they have several pairs of jointed legs. They have hard protective outer shell. They have two pairs of antennae, and eyes are present at the end of the stalks. Next, insects we all are very acquainted with. They are segmented. They are segmented. They have three body parts. That is, their body is divided into three regions, which is the head, thorax, and abdomen. They have 6 legs. So this is the important characteristic of the insects, that they have 6 legs. This might be confusing to some, that some people consider arthropods as the ones which have 6 legs, but it is not the case. Insects which belong to arthropods are the ones that have these 6 legs. In some cases, you will find that the arthropods might have more than 6, but they belong to class. So insects are the ones that have the 6 legs. Not all the arthropods have the 6 legs. So the next is the millipede, long repeating trunk. They have antennae and they have many legs, pairs of legs. The next is the trilobites, which are extinct. So they are 3-lobed. They have 3 lateral body parts: segment, thorax, and tail section. So this is the basic classification of arthropods, and now we will see the characteristics of these arthropods. So one of the very important characteristics of arthropods that allow these arthropods to survive in almost all the conditions is the presence of their exoskeleton. That is the skeleton which is present outside their body. So a rigid but jointed exoskeleton is present in the arthropods. It is composed of primarily of chitin, which is also known as fungal cellulose. So the chitin has a property that it is strong, it is flexible, and it is a nitrogenous polysaccharide. The exoskeleton serves function. So as the name suggests, skeleton, since it is present on the outer side and it is hard, therefore it allows for the protection. Also, it provides an attachment for muscles. It helps in the locomotion and the prevention of desiccation. So in some arthropods, it prevents the drying out the organism by preventing the moisture to lose out from it. However, we can say because it is hard and non-expandable, so when the size increases and the exoskeleton is non-expandable because it is really hard, therefore situation the organism has to molt. That is, the arthropods have shed their exoskeleton. So as they grow larger, they have to shed their exoskeleton. So therefore they belong to the category of ecdysiozoans. That is the ones which undergo molting. That is the ones which shed their undergoes molting or which shed their exoskeleton. Before molting, the body secretes a newer, larger skeleton which is comparatively underneath the older one, and after enzymes partially dissolve and weaken the older exoskeleton, breaks it open and comes out of that exoskeleton. The new exoskeleton then quickly expands and further hardens. This is how the exoskeleton formation takes place. Firstly, as the size grew, the newer exoskeleton is formed, which is comparatively larger, older exoskeleton, and during the time of its formation, it is quite soft and wrinkles place. And once the exoskeleton opens or breaks down, the organisms comes out of that exoskeleton, and the new exoskeleton then further quickly expands to take up that new size, and it hardens further to perform the functions like protection or the prevention of desiccation, etc. So this you can see that this is an example of how the exoskeleton helps. So the joint in an arthropod exoskeleton is a region where the cuticle is thinner. So you can see here, this is the joint which is present in the arthropods. So you can see that the cuticle is comparatively thinner in this region. You can see that the cuticle is comparatively thinner in this region as compared to the complete part, and it is comparatively softer as compared to the rest of the cuticle. And the direction of movement is towards the flexor muscle, so they have two types of muscles. One is the flexor muscle in their legs. So you can see in this joint they have flexor muscle and extensor muscle. Depending upon which one is contracted, the direction of the movement is defined by that. So the contraction of flexor muscle or the extensor muscle, which is present near the joint of the insect, defines the direction of the movement. The exoskeleton, in the B figure, you can see the exoskeleton composition. So the exoskeleton is secreted by the epidermis. So the outer layer, which is the epidermis, which is formed by the ectoderm, secretes the exoskeleton. And what basically the exoskeleton consists of exocuticle and endocuticle. And it is hardened by the, as I mentioned, that with time it gets hardened. So it is hardened by the deposition of the calcium carbonate. And the epicuticle is a waxy layer. So this outer one, which is the epicuticle, which is present above the exocuticle, is a waxy layer. So it is waxy layer that allows the prevention of the moisture to move out of the body. Chitin makes up the bulk of the exo and endocuticle. So in exo and endocuticle, as we have already mentioned, that chitin is the main composition, while the epicuticle is waxy in nature. So this is the composition of exoskeleton. And because, as I mentioned, exoskeleton is a non-living composition of the arthropods, therefore they have to shed. And the process of the shedding is known as the molting. When the arthropods grow, they have to shed their exoskeleton. So you can see the molting in this. You can see the outer exoskeleton is being shed by the organism once it grew in size. And then further, once it reaches to its original size, the newer exoskeleton gets hardened by the deposition of the calcium carbonate. The next property of the arthropods which we discussed was the segmentation. So the segmentation is readily apparent because each segment has a pair of jointed appendages. Even though certain segments are fused into a head, thorax and abdomen, as I mentioned that in certain cases they form cephalothorax, where the head is fused with the thorax region. So they form cephalothorax, which is for the fusion of head and thorax. So the jointed appendages of arthropods are basically hollow tubes which are moved by the muscles. We also see that how the flexor muscles and extensor muscles are present in the joints and they are helping in the movement, defining in the direction of movement. Typically, the appendages are highly adapted for a particular function. For example, they have a function of food gathering. There are certain appendages like, for example, they have graspers that helps in the reproduction, or they have legs that help in the locomotion. So the appendages are not what most of the people think is that the appendages are, they consider appendages as analogous to the legs, but it is not only the legs, but there are certain other appendages. For example, the ones which are there for food gathering, the ones which are helps in the reproduction and the locomotion. In addition, many appendages are associated with the sensory structures and are used for the tactile purposes. That is, they have the sensory function. So therefore they help in the sensing those, basically they act as the sensory organs. So this is an external anatomy of arthropods. For example, I have tried to show the external anatomy of arthropods using the example of a lobster. So you can see that they have a head region, they have thorax region. This is a thorax region, which I have marked here, thorax region. And then they have walking legs. They have swimming appendages, one pair per abdominal segment. So you can see that these are also considered as appendages. The head and thorax leads to the formation of cephalothorax, and they have abdomen. The abdomen is segmented. You can see that they have segments in the abdomen. So the abdomen is segmented. They have mouth parts which help in the feeding. So they have feeding appendages also. They have pincers which help in the defense. Then they have antennae which helps in the sensory, which have the sense, which act as the sensory organs and help in getting the sensory reception. So basically, uh, this is a dorsal view of a lobster, and some important crustacean characteristics are shown here. The body is segmented, usually in the abdominal region. The appendages, as I mentioned, it includes the antennae, the pincers, which helps in the defense, mouth parts, which help in the feeding, walking legs, and the swimming appendages. And all of these appendages are jointed. The head wears a pair of compound eyes. So one of the important features in arthropods that allow which is also one of the reasons that they are very uh, sensitive and they are very precautious towards their environment, is their presence of the compound eyes. So unlike the normal whatever like single lens eye we humans have, they have compound eyes in which many lenses are present. So we will learn about compound eyes also. So they have a pair of compound eyes, which is the multi-lens eyes, each situated on a movable stalk, and the whole body including appendages is covered by an exoskeleton. So this we have already discussed that the exoskeleton is present. Segments we discussed in case of crustaceans, for example in lobsters, the segment are mostly prominent in the abdominal region, as we can see that the different segments are present, and the different appendages like antennae, pincers, mouth parts, walking legs, swimming appendages, etc. are present, and all of these appendages are jointed. So this jointed appendages is the important feature, as we know the word arthropod itself means jointed appendages. This is an anatomy of grasshopper, an insect. So we can see that the body is divided into three regions. The first one is the head, the second one is the thorax, the third one is the abdomen. They have compound eyes, they have pair of antennae that help in the sensing. So the insect body has three regions, which is the head, thorax, and abdomen. The segmentation of the thorax and abdomen is obvious. In case of the insects, we can see that the segments are present on the thorax region and in the abdomen region, but the segments from that form the head are fused. So in head region, you cannot find very distinct segments. The second important character is the heart. The insect heart drives hemolymph. So basically, when we will learn in details about the circulatory system, we will get to know that they have an open circulatory system. So we know that in open circulatory system, the interstitial fluid or the circulatory fluid is same, and it is known as the hemolymph. So the interstitial fluid and the circulatory fluids are not different, they are not distinct, they are the same, and this is the hemolymph which is pumped throughout the body with the help of the heart. They have a well-developed nervous system, comparatively developed to the previous phyla. The two nerve cords meet in the head, where the ganglia of several anterior segments are fused into a cerebral ganglion, which is the here you can see this one. So this is the one that has been shown in white color here. The antennae, eyes, and other sense organs are concentrated on the head region. We know that most of the sensory organs are present in vicinity to the head, and they are mostly present in the head regions. Malpighian tubules are used for as an excretory organs. Metabolic waste is removed with the help of the Malpighian tubules, which are the outpocketings of the digestive tract. So you can see here, the ones which are shown here in the green colors, these are the Malpighian tubules. Then the sex organs or the reproductive organs are different. They are present in the different organisms. So this is the female grasshopper, therefore ovary is being present here. They have tracheal tubes for the gaseous exchange, and the nerve cord is present. The insect nervous system consists of a pair of ventral nerve cords. They have a pair of ventral nerve cords with several segmental ganglia. This is the mouth parts which are being formed. So in insect, so basically in insects, the mouth part is formed by several pair of modified appendages. It includes mandible, which allows the insects or the grasshoppers for chewing. In other insects, mouth part, depending upon the what type of feeding habit the insect has, so their mouth parts are specialized in that sense. For example, the grasshopper chew their food, therefore they have mandibles. And while in some cases, the mouth parts are specialized for the lapping, piercing, or sucking. For example, if they have to pierce through the host skin and they have to suck the blood, so they have piercing. or if they have to suck the nectar, then they have sucking type of mouth parts. So these mouth parts are being adapted based on the different feeding habits of the insects. However, the basic characteristics are almost all of these characteristics are defined here, that their body is divided into three regions. They have an open circulatory system. They have cerebral ganglion with a pair of ventral nerve cord. They have tracheal tubes, which allows for the gaseous exchange. Then they have Malpighian tubules for the excretory system, and their mouth parts consist of different appendages, and they are modified according to their feeding habits. So this is the basic of all the arthropods, mainly the insects. So we will learn about these in details also. So this is the nervous system. So as I mentioned that they consist of a brain with a pair of ventral nerve cords, and they have a segmental ganglia. So this we have discussed, that arthropods, for example, insects, they have a brain and a ventral nerve cord that contains clusters of neurons organized in segments called segmental ganglia. So you can see here that they have segmental ganglia, which is the clusters of neurons that are organized in the different segments. The head bears various types of sense organs. So as I mentioned also that the antenna or various sense organs are mostly present near the head or over the head. So for example, the eyes, which is a sense organ, are present on the head. The compound eye is composed of many complete visual units, so which operates independently. So basically in the compound eyes, they have different units, multiple lens, and each of these lens functions individually. The simple eye, like that of the vertebrates, have a single lens that brings the image to focus onto many receptors, each of which receives only a portion of the image. While in case of compound eyes, every lens forms its own image, not the portion of the image. So in addition to sight, many arthropods have well-developed touch, smell, taste, balance, and hearing. So they have well-developed sensory system, and they display many complex behaviors and methods of communication. For example, we might have seen the pattern of communication in honeybee. So many patterns have been studied in honeybee, like when they dance in a particular fashion, what type of communication they are trying to do. So therefore, basically many complex behavior and methods of communications are being observed in different arthropods. So the compound eye, which I was discussing, basically, as I mentioned, that arthropods have a compound eye that contains many individual units, and each unit has its own lens and photoreceptors. So each of these units have its own lens and photoreceptors. A compound eye consists of up to several thousand light detectors called ommatidia. So each of these ommatidia, which is the facets of the eye, has its own light focusing lens. So the unit of a compound eye is known as the ommatidia, right? So this is the unit of the compound eye. Each ommatidium detects light from a tiny portion of the visual field. So basically, the facets on the head of a fly form a repeating pattern visible in this photomicrograph. So you can see that how different ommatidia forms a repeating pattern, leading to the formation of a compound eye. And you can see in this photomicrograph also that each of these is an ommatidium. So each of these green patch with complete this rod-like structure, which is rhabdom, and a photoreceptor is known as the ommatidium. These are the axons, which is the nerve endings that allows the formation of the image. So the cornea and the crystalline cone of each ommatidium together forms the lens. So this lens is being formed by the cornea and the crystalline cone. So you can see this is a zoomed in image of this single ommatidium. So the cornea and the crystalline cone forms the lens that focuses the light on the rhabdom. So this light is being focused on the rhabdom. So the cornea captures the light, and the lens using the crystalline cone. This cornea and crystalline cone together act as the lens that focuses the light on the rhabdom. An organelle, which is formed by and extending inward from a circle of photoreceptors. So this is formed from the photoreceptors. The rhabdom basically traps the light. So it traps the light. Now, since it is trapping the light, it can be considered as photosensitive. So it is the photosensitive part of the ommatidium. The information gathered from different intensities of light entering the many ommatidia from different angles is used to form a visual image. So basically, therefore, it allows to form a image from different angles and of different intensities. Because each of these ommatidium is capturing the light from different angles and different intensities. The light is being captured and focused with the help of the cornea and the crystalline cone that together forms the lens, which is then focused or directed towards the rhabdom that traps the light. This rhabdom acts as a photosensitive part and leading to the formation of the image. The next is the respiratory organs. So one important characteristics that we study was the compound eye, in which many lenses are present instead of a single lens. The next is the respiratory organs. So there are various forms, as we know that arthropods are present almost everywhere. Therefore, the marine form uses the gills, which are vascularized, highly convoluted. So basically, they have thin wall. This thin wall allow the rapid gaseous exchange. So therefore, these gills are vascularized. The vascularization obviously helps in allowing the gaseous exchange. They are highly convoluted and they are thin walled. So these specifications allow for the gaseous exchange. Terrestrial forms have book lungs, example spiders, or they have an air tubes called the trachea, which is the windpipe. Trachea serves as a rapid way to transport oxygen directly to the cells. We will see how. So trachea have a single layer of cells. So basically, single layer of cells therefore allows them to have a thin cell layer. Therefore, rapid diffusion of the gases. Right? Obviously, the single layer of cells will be thin. And this is supported by the spiral thickenings of the chitin. The trachea branch into even the smaller. So this trachea then further branch into the smaller tubules like tracheoles. This is the trachea, which is a broader branch, then which further divided into many sub-branches, which is the tracheoles. These tracheoles, although further rebranch in finally the air tubes of about 0.1 micrometer in diameter remains. So also the tracheoles indent the plasma membrane so that they terminate close to the mitochondria so that the oxygen can be supplied rapidly. Therefore, oxygen can flow more directly from a tracheole to mitochondria where cellular respiration occurs. We know that mitochondria are the powerhouse, their cellular respiration occurs. So tracheoles enters into the plasma membrane, penetrates into the plasma membrane, opens near the mitochondria. Mitochondria are the hub for the cellular respiration. Therefore, the oxygen is provided readily to the mitochondria, therefore allowing the easy gaseous exchange. The trachea also disposed of carbon dioxide. Unlike we humans have hemoglobin, many arthropods contain copper containing hemocyanin pigment, therefore their blood will be blue in color. So this is the structure of the trachea or the spiracles which are present. So trachea is a system of air tubes which extend through the body of the insect. So you can see here the spiracles. So this is if I zoomed here, so these are the spiracles, and if I zoomed in into this image, so this will be a spiracle, which is the opening. So the trachea, which is the windpipe, which is supported by the chitin. So you can see in this figure that these membranes, these lines are the chitin rings that supports the trachea. Right? So this photomicrograph shows the chitin rings. So this is the trachea, which is further subdivided into the tracheoles that penetrates into the cell. So this is the system of air tubes that extends throughout an insect's body, and the tubes carry oxygen to the cells. Air enters the trachea at the openings called the spiracles. So how the air enters into the trachea? Through the opening, which is the spiracle. Fine. And from here, the air moves into the smaller tracheoles, as I mentioned, which take it to the cells where the gaseous exchange takes place. The photomicrograph here, this one shows how the walls of the trachea are stiff, like they are stiffened with the bands of the chitin. So this chitin ring provides the stiffness to the walls of the trachea. The next very important characteristic is the metamorphosis, or as I mentioned, they have different larval stages. reduced competition. So one of the important characteristics why arthropods are very, very flourished, or they are very, we can say that they are highly stable animals, is that they have the reduced competition. So they have reduced competition through the process of metamorphosis. Metamorphosis means, in Greek, meta implies change and morph means form. So basically they change their shape or the form as they grow. So basically many arthropods undergo a drastic change in the form and physiology that occurs as an immature stage called a larva becomes an adult. So when they undergo this change from larva to adult, their form might change. They may undergo changes in the form changes, and they may undergo changes in the physiology as well. This process is known as the metamorphosis. This is metamorphosis. Among arthropods, the larva, so how they reduce this competition is that the larvae eat different foods, they live in different environmental conditions than the adult. So this is how they reduce the competition between the larva and the adult itself. So between the young stage and in the adult stage, they reduce the competition. For example, the larval crabs live among and feed on planktons, that is the small plants which are present in water, while the adult crabs are the bottom dwellers. So they live in the bottom and they catch the live prey or scavenge the dead organic matter. So this is how they reduce the competition. The larval crabs may feed upon, they are the they feed on the, they are the surface dwellers and they feed on the planktons, while the adult crabs are the bottom dwellers. So they dwell in the bottom of the ocean and they live on the, they catch the live prey or scavenge the dead organic matter. Among insects, we might have learned or we might have seen the metamorphosis of the butterflies. We know that the caterpillar is formed, then resulting into the adult butterfly. So the caterpillar feeds on the leafy vegetation while the adult feeds on the nectar. You might have seen the caterpillar that feeds on the leaves. So the caterpillar feeds on the leafy vegetation while the adult feeds on the nectar of the flowers. So this is how this metamorphosis is also helping in reducing the competition. Now there might be two types of metamorphosis. The first one will be the incomplete metamorphosis, that, for example, that occurs in the grasshoppers. The second one will be the complete metamorphosis, for example, that occurs in the butterfly. So for in incomplete metamorphosis of grasshoppers or some other insect groups, the young ones are called the nymphs. So this is important. This might be asked that in incomplete morphosis, the young ones are called the nymphs. And the important character is that they resemble the adults but are smaller. That is, they have different body proportions and lack the wings. This is the only difference. They resemble the adults in almost all the cases. The point of difference is that they are just smaller in size. That is, they have different body proportions and they lack the wings. So the nymph undergoes a series of molds, each time looking more like an adult only. When the final mold, with the final mold, the insect reaches the full size, it acquires the wings and becomes sexually mature. So this is the only stage. In this, the young ones are known as the nymph. The nymph undergoes various series of molting. So the molting happens, resulting into the adult. Otherwise, the nymph resembles the adult in almost all the cases. That is, the only difference is that they are smaller and they do not have wings. So with time, with different molting stages, the wings develop, they reaches the full size. While if I talk about the insects with complete metamorphosis, they have the larval stages that are specialized for eating and growing, that are known by names such as caterpillar, maggot, or grubs. So they are different names. For example, for some insects, we call them maggots. For some, we call them grub, or commonly we know about the caterpillars, because this is the very well-known example which we learn in our previous classes also, for the especially in the case of butterflies. So the larval stage here looks entirely different from the adult stage. This is the very important point. This is a complete metamorphosis, complete change in the morphology, complete change in the form, in which the larval stage looks entirely different from the adult stage, which specializes in dispersal and reproduction. So the adult stage have reproductive organs developed. The young larval stage do not have. Although this is also the case in the nymph also, but In nymphs, the morphology or the outer structure or the form is almost similar to the adult, just that the size is smaller. So metamorphosis from the larval stage to the adults occurs during the pupal stage. So there are various stages. From the larval stage to the adult stage occurs during the metamorphosis mainly occurs during the pupal stage. So basically, if I talk about the complete metamorphosis, considering the example of butterfly, we have different stages. For example, the larva, which is known as the caterpillar. Then we have the pupa stage. So this larva to adult occurs through various pupal stage, as I mentioned. So they have the pupa, which further undergoes changes, later stage pupa. Then we have emerging adults that finally sheds their outer skin, and then we finally have an adult which is which have reproductive organs developed and which is having different form. So you can clearly see the difference in the caterpillar or the larva and the adult. The wings are developed, the form is different, completely they are looking two different organisms. So this larva to adult stage transition occurs through the pupal stage. So the larval caterpillar spends time eating and growing, molting as it grows. After several modes, the larva develops into a pupa. Within the pupa, the larval tissues are broken down and the adult is built by the division and differentiation of the quiescent cells. So quiescent cells are the ones which are in the senescent stage, which are in the quiescent stage, basically G0 phase, and now they become active and they differentiate. Eventually, the adult begins to emerge from the pupal cuticle, and hemolymph is pumped into the wings, veins, and then withdrawn, leaving the hardened veins as struts supporting the wings. The insects will fly off and reproduce, deriving much of its nourishment from the food reserves stored by the feeding larva, and then ultimately it will start acquiring nutrition from the environment. So this is how the changes happen in the complete metamorphosis. While if I talk about the incomplete metamorphosis, it is mainly from the nymph to the adult stage and mainly involves molting. So just by the process of molting, only the size change occurs. The next is the circulatory system. We have already discussed that they have an open circulatory system in which the heart pumps the hemolymph in the sinuses and surrounding organs. So basically, in open circulatory system, for example, the grasshopper is shown here. The hemolymph surrounding the body tissue also act as a circulatory fluid. So basically, in this case, the interstitial fluid is same as the circulatory fluid, and it is known as the hemolymph. As there is no closed vessels through which the blood can flow, therefore it is just the same as the interstitial fluid, and it is known as the hemolymph. So arthropods have an open circulatory system, as I mentioned, in which the circulatory fluid bathes the organs directly. There is no concept of blood vessels. In these animals, the circulatory fluid is called the hemolymph, is also the interstitial fluid that bathes the body cells. So contraction of one or more heart pumps the hemolymph through the circulatory vessels into the interconnected sinuses or the spaces surrounding the organs. Within the sinus, chemical exchange occurs between the hemolymph and the body cells. All the, like for example, the gaseous exchange also happens. Relaxation of the heart draws the hemolymph back in through the pores. So once the heart is contracted, hemolymph is rushed towards the organs, and if it is relaxed, the hemolymph is drawn towards the heart back through the pores, which are equipped with walls that close when the heart contracts. So body movement helps circulate the hemolymph by periodically squeezing these sinuses. So this is how, so they have tubular heart, for example, in case of grasshoppers. So the pumping of this heart leads to the release of the hemolymph in the sinuses surrounding the organs. The open circulatory system of larger crustaceans such as lobsters and crabs includes a more extensive system of vessels as well as an accessory pump. So they have an accessory pump because they are larger, and the open circulatory system therefore requires a more extensive system of blood vessels. Reproductive system, if I talk about the reproductive system, the sex organs are present in different organisms. That is, they have a male and female reproductive system which is present in different animals. So they have a male animal and they have a female animal depending upon the type of the reproductive organ which is present. For example, this I have shown as a male fruit fly. So this male fruit fly is being shown here. So sperms are formed in the testes. So the number here shows how the sperm movement happen. So basically the sperms are stored. These sperms are formed in the testes, which are the male reproductive gonads, where the sperm is being formed, and it passes through the sperm duct. That is the vas deferens, which is the sperm duct. So the number here shows the direction of movement of the sperm. So firstly, the sperms are being formed in the testes, then it passes through the sperm duct, vas deferens, and then they are stored in the seminal vesicle. So this is the place where the sperms are being stored. So the male ejaculates sperm along with the fluid from the accessory glands. So the accessory glands secrete some fluid, along with the sperm, this fluid is being ejaculated. So the male ejaculates the sperm along with the fluid from the accessory glands. Males of some species of insects and other arthropods have appendages called the claspers. So they have an important, some arthropods have important appendages which are known as the claspers. What is the function of this clasper? This is present specifically in males. It allows the male to catch a hold on the female body during the time of reproduction. So during the time of copulation, these claspers allow the hold on the female body that helps in the grasping the female body. So males of some species of insects and other arthropods have appendages which is known as the claspers that helps to grasp the female during the copulation. So for example, you can see here that they have penis and the claspers. So this claspers allows the hold and through the penis, and the sperms which were stored in the seminal vesicles are ejaculated, passing through the ejaculatory duct and the penis into the female body. So these sperms are then ultimately released into the female body during the copulation. If I talk about the female reproductive system, you can see that they have a pair of ovaries and they have oviduct. So eggs developed into the ovaries and then they travel through the oviducts to the uterus. So the eggs are then reaches to the uterus. After mating, the sperms are stored in the spermatheca. So the sperms which are being released into the female body are stored into the pouch, which is the female pouch, which is known as a spermatheca. This is connected to the uterus. So we can see here that it is connected to the uterus. And in this also we have the eggs. We know the female uses a stored sperm. So one of the stored sperm which is stored in the spermatheca. So when the egg is passing through this passage towards the uterus, when the egg is making its passage towards the uterus, it fertilizes. It gets fertilized. So before it enters the uterus, the egg is fertilized through the stored sperm, which is stored in the spermatheca, and the fertilized egg reaches the uterus. And before she passes the egg out through the vulva, so through this the eggs are being passed. So mostly they are oviparous. That is, they form the eggs, egg-laying organisms. They are oviparous. And they have internal fertilization, as we see that the fertilization happens inside the body of the female. So the fertilization is happening inside the body of the female. So they have internal fertilization. They are oviparous. That is, they are egg laying. So this is how. So the sperms which are being ejaculated into the female body is stored in the spermatheca, and when the egg is being when the egg is passing through the oviduct and is making the passage to the uterus, it is being fertilized by the sperm which are stored in the spermatheca, and finally the fertilized egg is released or passed out through the vulva. So this is the excretory. Next is the excretory system. We know that they have Malpighian tubules, which are the outpocketing of the digestive tract. So they are the outpockets of the digestive tract only. So insects and other terrestrial arthropods have organs called the Malpighian tubules that remove the nitrogenous waste and also function in the osmoregulation, that is maintaining the osmolarity. That is the salt balance, salt water balance. So we can see in the detailed figure, in the zoomed in figure, that the Malpighian tubules extend from the dead end tips immersed in the hemolymph, which is the circulatory fluid, to the openings into the digestive tract. So these are the Malpighian tubules, and you can see that they have the linings. So this is the lining, right? So this is the epithelium lining. So the filtration step is common to the other excretory system is absent. There is no filtration unit. Instead, they have the transport epithelium, which is that lines these tubules. So you can see that these are the linings of the epithelium, which are the transport epithelium. That lines the tubule, secretes certain solutes, including nitrogenous waste, from the hemolymph into the lumen of the tubule. So you can see that from the hemolymph, which is the surrounding fluid, this is the hemolymph, which is the surrounding fluid that contains all the nitrogenous waste, etc. So from here, the salt, water, and nitrogenous waste are being absorbed by these epithelium. They are being absorbed into the Malpighian tubules. Now, since there is a flow of salt and nitrogenous waste into these Malpighian tubules, then due to the process of osmosis. So what is osmosis? That is the movement of water from the higher concentration to its lower concentration. So when there is, suppose this is the cell, or this is the inner of the Malpighian tubule. So this is suppose this is the inner of the Malpighian tubule. Suppose this is the inner of the Malpighian tubule, and the salt and nitrogenous waste has entered. So the water concentration will be higher in the outer than the water concentration in the inner, right? So the water concentration here will be lower in the Malpighian tubules. So therefore, the water will also rush into the Malpighian tubules. So water follows the solutes into the tubule by the process of osmosis, and then the fluid then passes into the rectum. So from here, it passes into the rectum, which is that is connected to the external opening, which is the anus. Most of the solutes that are helpful for the body are reabsorbed, for example, the ions and the valuable organic molecules. And when these are reabsorbed, some of the water is also reabsorbed again by the process of osmosis, and therefore the water reabsorption by the osmosis follows. So this is how absorption and the reabsorption of water ions and the extra solutes takes place, and the nitrogenous waste is excreted out along with the fecal matter into the urine, the anus. So the nitrogenous waste, mainly the insoluble uric acid, are eliminated as nearly dry matter along with the feces. So this dry matter therefore helps in preventing the water loss. The water loss is less. So it is the insoluble uric acid in which the nitrogenous waste is excreted in the form of insoluble uric acid. Therefore, they are capable of conserving the water very efficiently. The insect excretory system is a key adaptation contributing to these animals' tremendous success on land. So we see that they have well-developed exoskeleton, they have well-developed sensory organs, like for example, they have compound eyes. Sensory system is well-developed, like compound eyes. Then they have well-developed excretory system, as we see. They undergo metamorphosis that allows to reduce the competition. So these are the various characteristics. That is one of the reasons why they are tremendously successful on the land. So therefore, this is about the phylum Arthropod. Now these are just some of the examples. The locust is being shown here in the figure A. B is the butterfly, C is the scorpion, fourth one is the prawn. So there are some economically important insects, for example, apis, which is the honeybee, from which we can rear the honeybee. The second is honey or the wax. Next is a Bombyx mori, for example, silkworm, Laccifer laca, lark insect that helps in making the lark, which is used in making the bangles, etc. Next is the vectors that carry the disease-containing organisms. For example, the Anopheles, Culex, Aedes. These are the mosquitoes that are the carrier for diseases like dengue, malaria, etc. Next is the gregarious pest that infest the crops into the groups. So the locust, which is the locust, is a gregarious pest. The very important example is a living fossil. This is usually asked that name some living fossils. So the limulus, which is the king crab, is a living fossil and is an example of phylum Arthropods. So with this, I would like to end today's session about the arthropods. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.